What if I told you that the voice in your head, telling you you're not good enough, that something terrible is about to happen, that you should be worried right now? What if I told you that voice is lying to you? And what if I told you that in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to take back control of your mind, manage your anxiety, and finally break free from the endless cycle of negative thoughts that have been holding you hostage? Because here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. Anxiety and negative thinking are not personality traits. They're not who you are, and they're definitely not permanent conditions you have to live with forever. They're patterns, habits, and reactions that your brain has learned. And just like any habit, they can be unlearned, rewired, and replaced with something better. So if you're tired of feeling like a prisoner in your own mind, if you're exhausted from the constant worry, the what-ifs, the catastrophic thinking, and the mental exhaustion that comes from battling your own thoughts every single day, then stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you has the power to completely transform your relationship with anxiety and negative thinking forever. Let's start by understanding what's actually happening in your brain when anxiety takes over. Your brain has this ancient alarm system called the amygdala, and its job is simple: keep you alive. Thousands of years ago, when our ancestors were living in caves and running from predators, this alarm system was incredibly useful. It would detect danger, flood the body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and prepare you to either fight or run away. The problem is your brain hasn't evolved as fast as your environment has. You're no longer running from saber-toothed tigers, but your amygdala doesn't know that. It treats a difficult conversation with your boss the same way it would treat a life-threatening predator. It treats social rejection the same way it would treat physical danger. And because of this mismatch between your ancient brain and your modern life, you end up feeling anxious about things that aren't actually dangerous at all. Your brain is trying to protect you, but it's overreacting, and that overreaction is what we call anxiety. Now here's where negative thoughts come in. When your amygdala sounds the alarm, your brain immediately starts looking for evidence to support that alarm. It's called confirmation bias. If your brain believes there's danger, it will scan your environment and your memories to find proof of that danger. This is where those negative automatic thoughts start flooding in. Thoughts like, I'm going to fail, everyone thinks I'm stupid, something bad is going to happen, I'm not good enough, I always mess things up. These thoughts feel true because your brain is in threat detection mode, but they're not objective reality. They're your brain's attempt to make sense of the anxiety you're feeling. And here's the really tricky part. The more you engage with these negative thoughts, the more you believe them, the stronger the anxiety becomes. It's a vicious cycle. Anxiety creates negative thoughts increase anxiety, and round you go. So how do we break this cycle? The first and most important step is to understand that you are not your thoughts. This might sound simple, but it's actually revolutionary. Most people believe that if they think something, it must be true. If the thought, I'm a failure, pops into their head, they automatically accept it as fact. But thoughts are just mental events. They're like clouds passing through the sky. Some are dark and stormy, some are light and fluffy, but none of them are permanent and none of them are you. The real you is the sky, not the clouds. You are the awareness that observes thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. When you can create this separation between yourself and your thoughts, everything changes. You stop being controlled by every negative thought that pops into your head, and you start being able to choose which thoughts you want to engage with and which ones you want to let pass by. One of the most powerful techniques for creating this separation is something called cognitive diffusion. The idea is to change your relationship with your thoughts so they have less power over you. Instead of thinking, I'm a failure, you think, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. Do you notice the difference? In the first version, you're fused with the thought. You've accepted it as truth. In the second version, you've created space between yourself and the thought. You're acknowledging it as a mental event, not a fact. You can take this even further. When a negative thought appears, you can say to yourself, thank you, brain, for that thought, or that's an interesting opinion, or even, there's that old story again. By labeling thoughts this way, you strip them of their power. They become less threatening, less believable, and easier to let go of. But let's be real for a moment. When you're in the middle of a full-blown anxiety attack, when your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and your mind is spinning with worst-case scenarios, telling yourself that thoughts are just clouds probably isn't going to cut it. You need practical, actionable tools that you can use in the moment to calm your nervous system and regain control. This is where understanding the physiology of anxiety becomes crucial. Remember, anxiety is a physical response. Your body has gone into fight or flight mode, and it's pumping you full of stress hormones. You can't think your way out of this state because the thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, has essentially gone offline. The emotional part of your brain has taken over. So the first thing you need to do is calm your body, and the fastest way to do that is through your breath. Here's a breathing technique that works almost immediately. It's called box breathing, and it's used by Navy SEALs and emergency responders. Here's how it works. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 4. Breathe out through your mouth for a count of 4, hold your breath again for a count of 4, and then repeat. Do this for at least 5 cycles. What this does is activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the fight or flight response. It's your body's rest and digest mode. By controlling your breath, you're literally sending a signal to your brain that says, hey, we're safe now, you can turn off the alarm. This works because your breath is one of the few functions in your body that's both automatic and under your conscious control. You can use it as a bridge between your conscious mind and your unconscious nervous system. Another incredibly effective technique for managing anxiety in the moment is called the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. This is especially useful when you feel like you're spiraling, when your thoughts are racing and you feel disconnected from reality. Here's what you do. Name 5 things you can see around you right now, then name 4 things you can touch. Then name 3 things you can hear, then name 2 things you can smell, and finally name 1 thing you can taste. What this does is pull your attention out of your head and into the present moment. Anxiety lives in the future. It's all about what might happen, what could go wrong, what you're worried about. But when you focus on your immediate sensory experience, you anchor yourself in the now, and in the now, you're usually safe. This technique interrupts the anxiety spiral and gives your nervous system a chance to reset. Now let's talk about negative thoughts more specifically. Negative thoughts come in many different patterns called cognitive distortions. These are thinking errors that almost everyone makes, but people with anxiety make them more frequently. The first one is called catastrophizing, which is when you automatically jump to the worst possible outcome. You send a text and someone doesn't respond immediately, so you think they hate you and you're going to die alone. The second is black and white thinking. If something isn't perfect, it's a complete failure. There's no middle ground. The third is personalization, which is when you take everything personally and assume you're the cause of negative events. Your friend is in a bad mood, so you assume you did something wrong. Then there's mind reading, where you assume you know what other people are thinking, and it's always negative. There's fortune telling, where you predict the future, and it's always bad. There's overgeneralization, where you take one negative event and turn it into a never-ending pattern. And finally, there's should statements, where you have rigid rules about how you and others should behave. I should be further along in my career by now. I should be able to handle this better. The reason it's so important to identify these cognitive distortions is that once you can name them, you can challenge them. When a negative thought pops up, ask yourself, what kind of distortion is this? Am I catastrophizing? Am I mind reading? Just by naming the distortion, you create distance from it, and you start to see that it's not an accurate representation of reality. Then you can challenge the thought by asking yourself questions like, what's the evidence for this thought? What's the evidence against it? What would I tell a friend who was thinking this way? What's a more balanced way of looking at this situation? Is this thought helpful? Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you make a mistake at work and immediately have the thought, I'm terrible at my job and I'm probably going to get fired. First, identify the distortion. This is catastrophizing and overgeneralization. You're taking one mistake and turning it into a permanent character flaw and a prediction of disaster. Now challenge it. What's the evidence? The evidence is that you made one mistake. What's the evidence against this thought? You've been at this job for 3 years. You've received positive feedback in the past. Your boss hasn't said anything about firing you, and everyone makes mistakes. What would you tell a friend? You'd probably say, everyone makes mistakes. One mistake doesn't define your entire career. What's more balanced? I made a mistake and that's disappointing, but it doesn't mean I'm terrible at my job. I'll figure out how to fix this and learn from it. See the difference? You're not denying reality, but you're also not catastrophizing. Now, I want to be very clear about something. The goal is not to never have a negative thought again, because that's impossible and it would actually be harmful to try. Sometimes negative thoughts are appropriate. Sometimes worry is useful because it helps you prepare for challenges. The problem isn't having negative thoughts. The problem is when negative thoughts become automatic, distorted, constant, and when you believe them without question. So the goal isn't to eliminate negative thoughts forever. The goal is to change your relationship with them so they don't control your life. This brings us to another crucial concept: acceptance. Fighting against anxiety and negative thoughts actually makes them stronger. It's called the pink elephant paradox. If I tell you don't think about a pink elephant, what immediately pops into your mind? A pink elephant. The same thing happens with anxiety. When you try to suppress them, push them away, or force yourself to stop thinking them, you actually increase their frequency and intensity. This is why acceptance is so powerful. When you can accept that anxiety and negative thoughts are part of your experience without fighting them, they lose their power. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means you're acknowledging reality as it is in this moment without resistance. You're saying, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. I don't like it, but I can handle it. This is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. This will pass. When you stop fighting your experience and start accepting it, the intensity usually decreases. Let's talk about something that most people with anxiety don't realize. Avoidance is the fuel that keeps anxiety alive. Every time you avoid something because it makes you anxious, you teach your brain that the thing you're avoiding is dangerous. You reinforce the fear. Let's say you're anxious about social situations, so you start turning down invitations. In the short term, this feels like relief. But in the long term, you've made the problem worse, because now your brain has learned that social situations are dangerous. This is how anxiety takes over your life, one avoidance at a time. The antidote to avoidance is exposure. You gradually expose yourself to the things that make you anxious, starting with the least scary and working your way up. Each time you face something you're afraid of and nothing bad happens, your brain learns that this thing actually isn't that dangerous. If you're anxious about public speaking, you don't start by giving a TED talk. You start by speaking up once in a small meeting. Then you give a presentation to a couple of colleagues. You build up gradually. Here's another powerful tool: mindfulness meditation. The science behind mindfulness is incredibly robust. Regular mindfulness practice literally changes your brain. It strengthens the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation, and it shrinks the amygdala, your brain's alarm system. Over time, mindfulness makes you less reactive to stress and anxiety, and you don't need to sit for an hour a day. Even 5 or 10 minutes can make a significant difference. So what is mindfulness? It's the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Most of the time, your mind is either dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Mindfulness trains you to bring your attention back to the here and now. It's not about stopping your thoughts. It's about noticing when your mind has wandered and gently bringing it back. You're practicing the skill of noticing thoughts without getting caught up in them. This skill then transfers to the rest of your life. If you're new to mindfulness, start simple. Find a quiet place, set a timer for 5 minutes, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. When your mind wanders, which it will, simply notice that it's wandered and bring your attention back to your breath. Don't judge yourself for getting distracted. That's part of the practice. Every time you notice you've been distracted and bring your attention back, you're strengthening your mindfulness muscle. Let's talk about lifestyle factors. Your mental health isn't separate from your physical health. If you're not sleeping enough, if you're eating poorly, if you're not moving your body, you're making yourself more vulnerable to anxiety. Sleep deprivation impairs your prefrontal cortex and makes your amygdala more reactive. Everything feels more threatening when you're sleep deprived. So if you're serious about managing anxiety, you need to prioritize sleep. Aim for 7 to 9 hours per night. Create a consistent sleep schedule. Avoid screens before bed. Treat sleep as non-negotiable. Exercise is another powerful tool. When you exercise, your brain releases endorphins, which are natural mood boosters. Exercise also reduces stress hormones. You don't need to become a marathon runner. Even a 20-minute walk can make a significant difference. Find some form of movement that you enjoy and make it a regular part of your routine. Your diet matters too. Processed foods, excessive sugar, and too much caffeine can all increase anxiety. A diet rich in whole foods supports brain health and emotional stability. And be mindful of alcohol. A lot of people use alcohol to manage anxiety, but it actually makes anxiety worse in the long run. Now I want to address rumination. This is when you get stuck in a loop of repetitive negative thinking. You replay a conversation over and over. You obsess over a mistake you made. You worry about the same problem endlessly without actually solving it. Rumination feels like problem solving, but it's not. It's just spinning your wheels. So how do you break out of rumination? First, notice that you're doing it. Ask yourself, am I problem solving right now, or am I ruminating? If you're ruminating, interrupt the pattern. Get up and do something physical. Go for a walk. Call a friend. Engage with something that requires your full attention. You can also set a designated worry time. Give yourself 15 minutes a day to worry about whatever you want. Write it all down, but when the 15 minutes is up, you're done. If worries pop up during the rest of the day, remind yourself, I'll think about this during my worry time. Let's talk about the power of self-compassion. Most people are incredibly harsh with themselves. They would never speak to a friend the way they speak to themselves. When you make a mistake, instead of saying, that's okay, everyone makes mistakes, you say, I'm so stupid, I always mess everything up. This internal self-criticism creates and maintains anxiety. Research has shown that self-compassion is actually more effective than self-esteem for emotional well-being. So how do you practice self-compassion? When you notice you're being self-critical, pause and ask yourself, what would I say to a friend in this situation? Then say that to yourself. Recognize that suffering is part of the shared human experience. You're not alone in struggling. Everyone feels anxious sometimes. Everyone has negative thoughts. And treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer someone you care about. Here's something else that's crucial. Anxiety often has a message. Sometimes anxiety is your body's way of telling you that something in your life needs to change. Maybe you're in a toxic relationship. Maybe you're in a job that's crushing your soul. Maybe you're neglecting your needs and boundaries. When anxiety becomes chronic, it's worth asking yourself, what is this anxiety trying to tell me? Not in a blaming way, but in a curious way. Sometimes the answer is that your anxiety is just misfiring, but sometimes the answer is that you need to make a change in your life, and the anxiety won't fully resolve until you do. Speaking of therapy, let's talk about when it's time to get professional help. If your anxiety is interfering with your ability to work, maintain relationships, or take care of yourself, if you're having panic attacks regularly, if you're developing phobias, if you're having thoughts of self-harm, or if you've tried implementing these strategies and nothing seems to help, please reach out to a mental health professional. There are evidence-based therapies that are incredibly effective for anxiety. Sometimes medication can also be helpful. There's no shame in needing help. Seeking help is one of the bravest things you can do. Let me share one more powerful technique. Values-based living. A lot of anxiety comes from feeling like you're not living the life you want to be living. When you clarify your values, what's truly important to you, and when you start taking actions aligned with those values, anxiety often decreases. Why? Because you're building a life that feels meaningful and authentic. You're not just reacting to fear anymore. You're moving towards something that matters. The difference is conscious choice versus automatic compulsion. You're moving from being a victim of your thoughts to being the director of your attention. And this brings me to one of the most powerful practices for achieving this: mindfulness. Mindfulness just means paying attention to the present moment without judgment. And the reason this is so powerful for ending overthinking is that overthinking can only exist when you're not present. Think about it. When you're fully absorbed in an activity, when you're in flow, when you're completely present with someone you love, you're not overthinking. It's impossible to overthink and be truly present at the same time. So the more you practice being present, the less power overthinking has over you. And you can practice presence anywhere, anytime, while washing dishes by really feeling the warm water, while eating by actually tasting your food, while walking by noticing the sensation of your feet hitting the ground. Every moment is an opportunity to practice. I also want to talk about the power of acceptance, because much of our overthinking comes from resisting reality. Something happened that we didn't want to happen, and instead of accepting that this is what's happening right now, we fight against it mentally. We replay it, trying to change it. We argue with reality. We think about how it should have been different. Acceptance doesn't mean you like something or that you're giving up on changing it in the future. It just means you stop arguing with what's already true. When you stop resisting, the emotional charge starts to dissipate. Your mind starts to quiet down, and you can actually respond effectively instead of just reacting. Let me give you a practical framework you can use starting today to break the overthinking cycle. First, notice and name it. When you catch yourself overthinking, simply acknowledge it. Say to yourself, "I'm overthinking right now." This creates distance between you and the thought pattern. Second, ask yourself if this thinking is productive or just repetitive worry. Be honest. Am I solving something or just suffering? Third, if it's not productive, choose to redirect your attention. Do 5 deep breaths focusing on the exhale, or notice 5 things you can see, or move your body. Fourth, if you keep getting pulled back to the overthinking, that's okay, that's normal, just repeat the process. Notice it, redirect, notice, redirect. And fifth, be patient and compassionate with yourself through this process. You didn't develop these overthinking patterns overnight, and they won't disappear overnight, but they will change if you consistently practice a different response. One of the most important things I learned is that you can't hate yourself into a better version of yourself. Being harsh and critical about the fact that you overthink just adds another layer of suffering. Instead, bring curiosity and kindness to the process. You're not broken, you just developed some patterns that aren't serving you anymore, and patterns can be changed. Your brain is neuroplastic, which means it's constantly rewiring itself based on what you practice. Every time you catch yourself overthinking and choose to redirect your attention, you're literally creating new neural pathways. Every time you bring yourself back to the present moment, you're strengthening the circuitry of presence. You're rewiring your brain in real time, and if you stay consistent with this practice, you will start to notice changes. Maybe at first you'll notice you're overthinking a little bit less intensely, or for shorter periods. Then you'll start to catch yourself earlier in the cycle. Then you'll have more moments of genuine presence and peace, and eventually overthinking will no longer be your default mode. So let me leave you with this final thought. The life you want, the peace you're seeking, the freedom from overthinking and anxiety, it's not something you'll achieve in some distant future once you've fixed everything about yourself. It's available to you right now in this moment, in the simple act of being present with what is. Every moment you spend overthinking is a moment you're not living, a moment you're missing. And you have the power right now to choose differently, to notice your mind wandering into overthinking and to gently bring it back to right here, right now. This moment is all you ever have, and it's enough. You're enough. The transformation begins the moment you decide to stop waiting for your mind to be perfect before you allow yourself to be present with your life. Start now. Start small. Start with just one breath, one moment of presence, and build from there.